Mr. President, earlier this week, I joined a bipartisan group of Senate colleagues, Senator Graham, Senator Ayotte, and Senator Blumenthal, Republicans and Democrats alike, to send a letter to the United States Department of Treasury. In our letter, we urged Secretary Jack Lew to continue the Obama administration's necessary and vital efforts to crack down on Mahan Air, a private Iranian airline that provides support for Iran's terrorist proxies and funnels weapons to Hezbollah and the murderous Assad regime in Syria. Mahan Air is only the latest example of a pattern of behavior we've come to expect from Iran, supporting terrorism and conducting destabilizing activities in the Middle East, conducting illegal ballistic missile tests in violation of UN Security Council Resolution 1929, and committing ongoing major human rights violations. Indeed, as we wrote in the letter to the Secretary, quote, strong and swift sanctions enforcement is vital to hold Iran to account for its ongoing support of terrorism, ballistic missile development, and human rights violations. Today, I'd like to dive further into Mahan Air's malign activities and explain why it's important that America work with our allies to continue to push back on Iran's bad behavior and to hold Tehran to the terms of the agreement reached last summer with regards to Iran's nuclear program. I'll also explain why it is critical that the Senate confirm Adam Zubin, Treasury's now acting Undersecretary for Terrorism and Financial Intelligence, who plays a key role in pressuring our allies to push back on Iran and who, in the absence of confirmation, is weakened in that vital role. If we are serious about our shared intentions to hold Iran accountable, then this Senate must confirm Adam Zubin, and our European allies must work with us to sanction Mahan Air. Mr. President, although Mahan Air is technically a private Iranian airline, it supports the operations of the IRGC, the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps, the hardline military force committed to the preservation of the revolutionary and extremist Iranian regime. Mahan Air also provides services to the Quds Force, an elite IRGC military force that is designated as a terrorist group by the United States Treasury Department under Executive Order 13224. Through its ties to the IRGC and the Quds Force, Mahan Air directly and indirectly provides men and materiel to Hezbollah, a terrorist organization based in Lebanon, and to the murderous regime of Bashar al-Assad in Syria. Yet despite these known ties, Mahan Air is still flying into 24 airports in countries around the region and world, including the United Kingdom, Germany, France, and Italy. And it is successfully procuring aircraft and equipment using front companies, an evasive approach that mirrors Iran's strategy in a number of industries, not just in airlines. Since October of 2011, the Treasury Department has taken key steps to sanction Mahan Air. That month, October of 2011, Mahan Air provided travel for members of the Quds Force who flew to and from Iran and Syria for military training, and other suspected officers who flew covertly in and out of Iraq. Less than a year later, in September of 2012, Treasury further cracked down on Mahan Air and two other airlines for a series of bad actions, including sending military and crowd control equipment to the Assad regime in Syria in coordination with Hezbollah, often under the cover of being humanitarian aid. Later, in both February of 2014 and May of 2015, our Department of the Treasury took further action against two front companies that helped Mahan Air to procure equipment and parts. The 2014 action penalized personnel and companies in the United Arab Emirates who helped Mahan Air to transfer money and to procure aircraft and other parts. This ongoing long-term pattern of behavior by Iran and its IRGC makes clear why the United States and our vital allies must work together to cut off Mahan Air's access to international markets and airports, and I commend our Department of the Treasury for taking these important steps to designate Mahan and its employees. These actions alone are important, but not sufficient. Both the United States and our European allies must do more. To start, I urge governments across the European Union to also designate Mahan Air and its many front companies for their support for terrorism. By continuing to support Syria's violent and discredited president, Bashar al-Assad, Iran has directly contributed to the slow and grinding collapse of Syria, to the enormous humanitarian crisis that has resulted into the destabilization of the region. There's a direct correlation between Iran's destabilizing actions in Syria, but also in Yemen, Lebanon, and Iraq, and the migrant crisis now facing all of Western Europe. The more that Iran uses Mahan Airlines to transport the very goods that supply Hezbollah, the longer the instability inside Syria will persist, and the more refugees and migrants will flee Syria towards our allies in Western Europe. Without the support of companies such as Mahan Air and the many front companies that it depends on, Iran and the IRGC would find supporting the Assad regime substantially more difficult and expensive. We must work together to keep Mahan Air from purchasing engines, aircraft, and other equipment for these malign purposes. The second step our allies can and should take is simple: to stop allowing Mahan Air to land at your airports. A company like Mahan Air, which supports terrorism in defiance of international norms, should not have easy access to international airports. More broadly, combating Iran's destabilizing actions in the Middle East and successfully and rigorously enforcing the terms of the nuclear deal with Iran will require meaningful international coordination. As I recently wrote in an editorial that ran in The Guardian, while I understand that many European companies will seek to do business with Iran now that certain economic sanctions have been lifted in compliance with the terms of the nuclear agreement, I urge our allies to remember three simple things. First, the United States and the UN continue to maintain and enforce economic sanctions against Iran. The United States' designation of Mahan Air is one of many unilateral sanctions examples, and many that we continue to keep in place. Second, stopping Iran's quest for a nuclear weapon must always remain a top priority. We are counting on our European allies to continue to share this view and to act in accordance with it, a view that they stated during our negotiations that led up to the nuclear deal. And third, as Iran's relationship with Mahan Air shows, the Iranian government remains a revolutionary regime with a long history of pursuing nuclear weapons and a long track record of supporting terrorism and destabilization in the Middle East. Mr. President, Iran's use of Mahan Air to evade international scrutiny is yet another reminder that we must remain vigilant in our oversight of Iran. Here in the United States, we appreciate the partnership of our European allies. In fact, the strength of this allegiance and our ability to act as one was a key factor that led Iran to agree to the strict terms of the nuclear agreement. We must continue to advocate for and keep front of mind the idea that the most important contract with Iran is the one we've already signed in the nuclear agreement. We must pursue every possible means of enforcing it, and that means cracking down on the front companies that facilitate Mahan Air and companies that are playing a direct role in fomenting instability in the Middle East. Just as importantly, I urge my colleagues today to put politics aside and confirm Adam Zubin, who oversees the implementation of sanctions in the Treasury Department. With experience in both the Bush and Obama administrations, Adam Zubin is the definition of an outstanding career public servant, nonpartisan, dedicated to his job, committed to his country. He has been widely praised by senators of both parties, but his confirmation has been blocked for nearly a year for reasons utterly unrelated to his capabilities or his performance in the job. The cause of this hold is and has been raw politics, but the consequences of the hold go far beyond that. When acting Undersecretary Zubin sits down at the negotiating table, the individuals on the other side, whether from the private sector or a foreign government, friend or foe, should know that he speaks for the American people and has the weight of the Senate and the whole government of the United States behind him. When Adam Zubin travels around the world to ask senior officials from foreign governments to sanction Mahan Air and its front companies or to prevent Mahan from flying into their airports, he's trying to convince foreign governments to do something difficult but necessary. Those foreign officials should know that he speaks not just for the Obama administration, but for the executive and legislative branches of our whole government, and that we as a people stand united against Iranian aggression. Mr. President, let's demonstrate to our allies and to Iran that Congress take these issues as seriously as we proclaim. Let's confirm Adam Zubin and other nominees who are vital to this effort, whose confirmations have been stalled for too long. Let's work together to crack down on Mahan Air and other Iranian avenues for sowing terror throughout the Middle East. And in the same spirit of collaboration that led to the nuclear agreement, let's come together to rigorously enforce the terms of the deal. Thank you, Mr. President, and with that, I yield the floor.